Hello, and thanks for joining me today on Geezers of Gear, episode number 230. Today's podcast is brought to you by Elation Professional. Elation is excited to offer the new Proteus Hybrid Max, the highly anticipated successor to the company's pioneering Proteus Hybrid, the moving head that arguably started the revolution in IP-rated lighting. Faster, brighter, and with a tougher IP66 rating, the Proteus Hybrid Max has already been featured on premier events like the New Year's Eve light show on Seattle's Space Needle and Enchanted Forest of Light at Descanso Gardens in Southern California. Please check out the Proteus Hybrid Max today at elationlighting.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Mainlight, a national dry hire rental provider specializes in supplying the latest lighting and stage equipment and technology. Their extensive rental inventory includes moving lights, truss solutions, control consoles, LEDs, and an array of weather-resistant IP65 rated fixtures, perfect for outdoor venues. Whether for theater productions, outdoor stadium events, or TV film broadcast, Mainlight is the partner you trust with gear you want. Committed to quality and reliability, Mainlight also provides a reliable, robust selection of used sales options to their clients. Each item is meticulously maintained, owned by Mainlight, and comes with warranty, providing you with confidence in your purchase. Strategically located across the U.S., their 4 key locations include Mainlight Tri-State in Teterboro, New Jersey, East in Wilmington, Delaware, South in Nashville, and Mainlight West in Las Vegas, Nevada. They combine the vast resources of a national company with the attentive, personalized service of a local provider. Discover how Mainlight can equip your next event by visiting mainlight.com today and get a direct quote through their comprehensive online ordering platform. I'm back, and we have another episode here for you today. So, who saw Marion yesterday? She was awesome. Marion from LDI. She's been there for ages, and she does an amazing job. Her and Ellen and the rest of the people at LDI do an amazing job. I've known them all for a long time. I appreciate them very much. I have a huge, high degree of respect for them. And so if you haven't had a chance to go listen to 229 yet, please do check out Marion and our discussion concerning her career and also the trade show, LDI trade show. And I also wanted to give props to this company right here. You can't really see their logo. Maybe I can move the stand in a little bit and you can see it. So Ultimate Support sent me one of these things to try and to give them my opinion. And I happen to completely love it. I've screwed it up now by bending it, but I love it. I think that this is the one I used to have, I think was a Rode one or something. They sent me this one. I think it just blows it away. It's such a better boom stand for anyone who's doing this kind of thing, whether it's a podcast or something else. Now, of course, I can't get it back to where I want it. But anyways, great stand. Thank you very much to Ultimate Support. Love it. And get one if you do a podcast or anything else that requires you to have a boom like this. And so today, our guest is Mr. Todd Spencer. And Todd's career spans more than 25 years with firms varying in size from 1 million to 3 billion in revenues. Over 18 years in executive leadership roles, working with both startups and established companies to guide strategic and operational growth, acquisitions, turnarounds, and business sales. Established track record of success in strategic plan development, operational optimization, new program design and deployment, business acquisition and sale, and the executive leadership of multifaceted global teams. Generating success with a client centered culture, established credibility, and industry reputation. And also partnering with AV and specialist event companies to achieve their growth vision through transformative strategies, providing consultative guidance to executives, entrepreneurs, and ownership groups to maximize the value and output of their business. I'll tell you what, that bio makes me feel unworthy of even having this guy on the show. So let's have a chat with Todd. Hello, Todd.
Hello, Marcel.
Isn't it weird when we have a talk before we come on and then I say, hello, Todd, like I just saw you, like I just answered the call?
Interrupted context. Yeah,
It's a, it's a,
exactly.
it's a bit odd. It's weird. You know who taught me that though was Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan always just goes, hello, Bob, and they've been talking for an hour and, you know, smoking something funny or drinking something funny or whatever it is they do before they start the podcast.
Right.
But I am no Joe Rogan, so I have to be a little more official. So appreciate you taking the time to come and do this. I know we've talked about it for a little while. I'm an admirer of the things that you have done and that you do. And I'm kind of a consultant geek. I like consultants who have these, really big packages of information that they collect from multiple companies. And I will give us both a disclaimer here and say that there's probably some things you can't talk about because you do probably have some NDAs with companies and things like that. And that's totally okay. Not going to try and get anyone in trouble. So any other ground rules?
Not that I can think of. Let's
Try
have fun.
really try really hard not to like do silly things like pick your nose on camera or whatever because I'm not going to edit that stuff out. I will leave it in on purpose.
As well, you should.
Yes, we do have blooper reels and we are not too proud to play them. So we will play them and they get played on me sometimes too. Like I do dumb stuff and it
Oh,
shows
nice.
up and God forbid, believe it or not, Sarah actually did a couple of dumb things and those showed up as well. So uh, there you go.
Awesome.
So, I like to kind of find out. This is your first time on the podcast, of course. So I like to get a little bit of history on how, our industry, and you're probably different than this. I'm guessing, you had a much more formal start to this, but our industry, especially some of the folks a little bit older than you that I get on to the podcast, usually like they were, playing basketball at the park or something, and somebody came and said, "Hey, jump in! I got a gig for you," and they don't even know anything about lighting or sound or anything, and next thing you know, they're working for ACDC or something. Um, and I mean, literally, I've heard so many of those stories, and it was either that, like, just totally by accident. I was sitting in a pub and met Mick Jagger, and all of a sudden, I was a stage manager, um,
Uh,
or I was a DJ, or I was a musician and realized I wasn't going to make any money as a musician, but I really liked the lighting stuff or the sound stuff or whatever.
uh,
Um, so, what was it that got you into the industry?
Yeah, for me, it was organic as well initially. I was really lucky. I had two teachers in middle school and then in high school who had both spent time in New York, had worked on Broadway, had worked off Broadway,
Oh,
and ironically had been roommates in New York at some point in the past before they came to Arizona, where I was and am, and decided to teach middle school and high school. And so I benefited greatly from that sort of accidental. I just met the right person who was really interested in it,
yeah,
and yeah, my parents weren't so interested in it because it had me coming home at like 1 and 2 in the morning after I'd be working in the shop and I'd be building a piece of scenery or playing with a lighting console and checking stuff out for the first time, and
right.
eyes wide as saucers. And so I think they got a taste early on of like, we're not sure we like having our kid in theater or this whole entertainment bug thing that seems to be happening that he's been bitten by.
Yeah,
But yeah, I really benefited greatly from that. And, for them, they actually went out of their way to try to get me connected with stuff, which was pretty cool. Looking
yeah,
back at it, I can't imagine sort of being in that environment now and having a teacher being like, yeah, you know what? I'm doing an overhire call over here. Why don't you come with me this Saturday and we'll go check it out, right?
Yeah.
And there are some that do. And I just got super lucky in that these guys made me a part of their own experience and their own community and sort of dragged me along with them in the places that I wanted to go. And they usually didn't have to drag too hard because I was super interested in all the toys and all the things they were doing.
So
And
you never actually had a real job then, a job outside our industry.
I've had a couple of different kind of consulting areas that I've worked with outside of our industry.
Yeah.
But yeah, my first job was actually a melodrama theater in Tucson, Arizona, thinking serving pizzas and beers. I was a lighting and sound tech, and then I was an assistant stage manager, and I think I was making like $3.75 an hour, and it was the best job I could have hoped for. Then it was
Wow.
a lot of fun and a lot of grind.
By the way, I don't think theater wages have gone up much since then.
Probably true.
I think it might
That's
be
probably,
390 now or something, but yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
wild. So, wow, that's pretty cool. Straight out of school and right into theater and learning your way around a shop and stuff. And so, I know, like fast forwarding a little bit, you started your own company, right?
I did. So I had a real interest in the lighting. Uh, Kind of going through the different calls that I would take, working for different labor companies, then just sort of getting my feet wet and checking it out. I started in audio actually, and that was a lot of my dad's influence. He had a background in designing audio products. He's an
Really?
engineer, hmm who has mostly worked in aerospace. So he had a real job by his standards and using his engineering talents there. But as it turns out, he's a brilliant design engineer for audio products, really high quality studio audio
And
type products.
anything we know?
He runs a company called True Audio Systems and
Yeah.
has designed a lot of preamps, and some of his design work has landed in other groups and other product manufacturers. And
Wow.
I don't in total know, but I know there's a handful of companies that sort of use his secret sauce in their products.
So was audio for him a side hustle? Like he was in aerospace and audio was just the thing, like a passion on the side, a hobby almost that actually paid some money occasionally?
Yeah, it was absolutely a hobby for him, and he found this kind of magical space, I think, for him where he got to blend the design, engineering, nerdy pieces that he liked with actually doing some front of house mixing. And
Oh,
that was
wow.
where I got sort of interested, is because I would tag along and be this really obnoxious little 3 foot nothing talking mouth in the background, asking all the questions of everybody who would talk to me. And what does that do? And how do you plug in that microphone? And what does this knob do? And
Wow.
so, all that to say, I got my first taste of it in audio, running front of house consoles and running monitor mix in some situations. And looking back on it now, it probably was a pretty funny sight to see like a 12-year-old kid run in front of house on a 48 or 60 or 72 channel
A,
plus console.
a
Like, I
10
mean, I
foot
was this
long
big and it was
analog
like, oh
console.
goodness,
Yeah.
what's that?
A 10-foot long analog console. Back in the
Yeah,
day when consoles were mean and big, now they're all this small and they got 800 channels and stuff, right? So,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
exactly. You had all the meters and all the little incandescent lights glowing up there on the deck, and yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like an 11 or 12-year-old kid. It was
That's
heaven. It was
wild.
amazing.
That is so cool. So, so you then transitioned into lighting because it was just more from the creative side, or what was it that attracted you more to lighting than audio?
Yeah, so I was in a venue where the lighting booth was on one side of the building and the audio booth was sort of on the opposite side of front of house, just the way that this building was set up.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed there was this rivalry very early on. The audio guys didn't much associate with the lighting guys, and the lighting guys thought the audio guys didn't get them and their way of life. And so there was this inherent kind of funny friction that was there. For me, what it was is when the lights move, the audience goes, "Whoa!" And when the audio sounds really good, they do this.
Yeah, it
Nothing, right?
doesn't make a lot of
Nothing.
difference.
It doesn't
They
make
know
a lot
when
of.
it's too loud or too quiet, but other than that, I mean, there's not a lot of change going on.
That's right. And so there were no oohs and ahs. And that's what it was, Marcel. It was the oohs and the ahs that when I sat there running in front of house going, those guys move the lights and they have these atmospheric effects and they do all this cool visual stuff. I want that.
Yeah.
And so that was how I got involved. I defected from the audio booth and moved over to the lighting booth. And they embraced me because I think it was their way of getting even with the audio guys that lighting was cooler, but it played in my
Uh,
favor. And and so I started doing more lighting gigs.
huh.
And the reason I started the company was because I noticed that the guys making more money brought their own gear with them. They
Uh,
were showing up on site with their own hog console, or hey, I got a 12 pack of movers I can throw at this show for you. And so I'm watching these guys and I'm like, well, I want to get paid more. I want to be able to do more stuff. And so I bought a console. And then I bought moving lights, and then I bought hoists and trusses, and then I had a warehouse, and it just, like this mushroom effect of what happened. So yeah, sorry, long way around, but that's how I got there. That's what started. That was just this thought that lighting was cooler and
yeah.
more fun, and got these audience reactions. And I needed to own some gear if I was gonna make it bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes tons of sense. Like, I love the entrepreneurial approach where it's just as simple as, hey, those guys drive the nice cars. Those guys over there drive the beat up old pickup trucks. I want to be those guys, and just
Uh-huh.
paying attention to how the money's flowing or how the deals are flowing in these situations. So,
Yeah.
um, small company, I'm guessing, like it never got to where you had hundreds and hundreds of moving lights. It was just a relatively small company.
Yeah, it was a relatively small company. And so I got a call one day because I was competing in hotels and convention centers. So what I found after a stint of traveling was, hey, there's some venues kind of local to me that I could go and rent some gear and do some, back then what we called more industrial shows. Now it's more corporate and AV, and it's then technology is more kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
mainstream accepted now. But back in those days, you didn't have big truss rigs hanging in ballrooms. This was not a common occurrence. And so I started selling into those hotels for those, Microsoft meetings and Amazon meetings and whoever was bringing their sales team to wherever they were going. And it was July 4th. I was outside grilling burgers. And full disclosure, I was a couple beers in, and my cell phone rings and I answer it, and it's Presentation Services, one of their regional vice presidents back then, who later became PSAV and then
PSAV.
later
Yeah.
became Encore Global. And so the guy says, I wanted to call you and let you know that I want you to stop competing in our hotels. And I paused for a moment and I laughed and I said, that doesn't sound like my problem.
Uh,
And he was very gracious to me, and he laughed and he said, let's just have lunchtime. Let's talk this thing out. Let's figure out what, maybe what we could do together. And so
so,
that was kind
were
of
were you freaking out or inspired that you were on this guy's radar?
I'll be honest, I don't think I had enough presence of mind in that moment to really
Yeah.
focus my
It was
thoughts
just
either way.
whatever. Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it was um, later I there was more inspiration to it, but new to business like that, you're also a little nervous, right? I mean, I didn't have the business history of thinking, hey, this guy doesn't have any real threat, that he can leverage against me. This is just sort of one company calling another saying, hey, I'm a little chapped, you're competing in our space. But I didn't have that history then, so I would say there's a little bit of fear too, like, hey,
Yeah.
that's a big dog. I got the big dog's attention, cool. Do I want the big dog's attention?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So, did you have lunch?
We did we did we had a nice little Italian deli down the street, and a big old Philly cheesesteak, and talked it out. And he turned out to be a lovely guy, and we became friends after that. And he said, I think there's an opportunity here. Would you consider selling your company and coming to work for us and helping us grow some of our brands with what you know how to do? And the short of that story was I ultimately said yes. And it was a great learning adventure and learned a lot about our business. And I learned about what to do and what not to do. And so, you ask about small company. It was a very small company. And one of the reasons why I do what I do now was inspired around the fact that I wish I had had somebody I could have called back then and said, "Hey, dude, I don't need all the chapters in sort of the big business playbook, but I would love to have a mentor that would give me the curated chapters of here's what'll really help you right now."
Yeah.
And I didn't have it. And
Yeah.
I try to be that for others.
Well, it's such a great point. Like the challenge is people don't understand. Like I know so many people who go watch like a video of some guru, business guru, whatever on YouTube, and they think that that's how they run their business. But the problem is a business from 0 to 500,000 is totally different than a business from 500,000 to 2 million, which is totally different than a business from 2 to 5 million. Every one of those businesses is completely different. So the answer to a question like, what should I do, is an entirely different answer depending on which one of those businesses they are, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm sure you now know how to deal with all kinds of those businesses. Like
Uh-huh.
somewhere I read in the stuff you sent me, I think revenue from, I don't remember what it was to something billion. It was from like 1 million to 3 billion or something. And there's a lot of stuff in there. Like there's a lot of different businesses. And, I learned that a long time ago that I really didn't know how to get a business past 15 million. Like I got a couple of them to 15 million and then just hit a ceiling. I didn't know what to do next.
Uh-huh.
And it's not that you forget how to sell or you forget how to hire people or you forget, it's just all the nuances. It's all the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates a lot for me. And that's an area where I spend a lot of my time actually is working with those groups that fit into sort of one of three categories. They're a founder led company, they're an early matrix company where maybe they've got a handful of investors, but it's not well structured, it's still pretty loose and trying to grow. And then you've got a mature matrix organization, which, are the big organizations that are big dollars and have C suites attached to them, right?
Yeah.
And they all have very different behaviors and needs and leadership ideals in many cases. And so, when you talk about the revenue thresholds, that is something that I think people don't really understand unless they've been and lived through the different stages of it. And so it's kind of it's interesting for me in a nerdy kind of a way because I'll get a call from somebody and they'll start describing the issues that they're having and I'll say, "Can I ask you a question? Is your business about X amount of revenue a year?" And almost invariably they will say, "Yeah, that's really close. How did you know that?"
Yeah.
And it's not magic, it's just because there are curated stages where businesses get hungrier or need different things to support their growth. And so hitting a plateau, very common. And the other thing that you mentioned that really hit for me is I think a lot of CEOs, owners, executive leaders tend to think if they hit a plateau or if they have a challenge, it's an indictment on them. It's an indictment on their inability to go or grow beyond a certain point. And it's absolutely not. What companies I think fail to give themselves enough grace on is to pause and say, "Man, we've kicked ass. We've done an amazing job of all of the things that we've brought to life over however many years to get us to today. And we could do some of these other things. Let's involve some other people who have been down that road, who have seen around the corner of what that looks like, and pull from those chapters in the playbook to help us now." And those are the people that I really enjoy working with, are the ones that know that there are those of us out there who don't mind riding shotgun. We don't
Yeah.
mind being the ghost in the machine to offer guidance or help and share those chapters from the big playbook that could influence them greatly.
Yeah. I mean, you just said so much stuff, but one of the things that stood out for me is this thing where CEOs, oh, I'm such a loser. I failed. I whatever. And I've gone through all of these same things, and I've had to basically coach myself out of it, or train myself, or whatever you call it. But one of the things I learned is to stop comparing yourself against others. Like to stop saying, I'm here, but Bob over there is here, and therefore I'm an idiot. But what you got to do is you compare yourself to yourself. You compare yourself to where you were 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever. And, like this was a real challenge for me because I had these sort of these levels in my head that I expected to hit by whether it was certain years of the business or certain my age or whatever it is. And then life happens, and then COVID happens, and then 52,000 other things happen. And, that's just the life of an entrepreneur. Like if you beat yourself up every time you hit a bump in the road, you're going to die of a heart attack, unfortunately, you know? So
Yeah.
no, really great words. And I mean, like I said, like I get people come to me all the time. Like I can help someone. I can't really help from like 0 to 5 million as much anymore because I never really behaved like the startups do today, where you go out with a great idea, you send around a pitch deck, you raise, a few angel investments or whatever it is. And like, I don't know that way of doing things. I'm a bootstrapper. So what I do is I go out and sell my car and get 2 credit cards. And then I start a business with that. And then I know that I got to pay those credit cards. So I better raise some money as fast as I can or raise some sales. And then you just keep building it from there. So very much a bootstrapped business model, right? But,
Uh-huh.
if somebody said, how do I get my business from, 5 million to 10 million or from 3 million to 5 million or whatever, I'm certainly an expert on that because I've done it multiple times.
Uh-huh.
And I've also stayed in contact with all of the new, like, this is the other thing. Doing that today versus doing that 5 years ago, totally different again because of tools that are available and yada, yada, right? So,
Yeah. That the money piece has radically changed, I feel like, in terms of not just the funding for the businesses, though I think that has been dramatically affected. Most of the deals that I'm seeing right now that either I'm involved with or others I know in our industry are sort of going through, money's harder to get. And the
yeah,
smaller you are, the harder it is.
yeah,
And there's a lot of reasons for that, in my opinion. I think right now we've gotten to a place where there's so many kind of upper mid and mega players in terms of revenue that big investors are looking for big returns. And
yeah.
they know that they're going to have to put in the time and the grind with a smaller one to get a lesser return than they will with a bigger one. And when you've got something big and you've got big money to play with to force multiply that big thing that's already got momentum, that's
Yeah.
where you put your energy.
Well, it also used to be where these guys, especially like family offices or just wealthy individuals, um, they couldn't sit on their money because it was earning a half a point or something. It
Uh,
wasn't. But now they can earn 4.5, 5% plus just leaving it sitting, in a financial institution and doing nothing. Like the money's completely safe, and so yeah, I mean, it's definitely getting harder. Your deal has to really stand out among a crowd. And most of this is just knowledge from friends of mine and stuff, or companies I've helped get to
uh,
that stage or whatever. But I've not raised money myself. I never have, and hopefully never will. But who knows? Maybe I will someday. But yeah, it's an interesting world out there right now. Like I think everyone's looking for a deal, but they want more assurances now than banks do in some cases. Like, why were you 3 points down in Q4 last year versus Q3 and blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
And it's just like, man, if my business were perfect, there's a very good chance I wouldn't have to be raising money from you right now. So
Uh-huh.
part of it is probably to cover up some sort of an inefficiency or a need or whatever, or maybe it's just growth capital and whatever. But so
Yeah.
did you sell that small business then? Did somebody buy it?
I did. PSAV acquired the assets
Oh, they
of,
did.
of
Oh,
that.
there you go.
They
Well,
did.
that's nice. They acquired your company and then hired you.
They did, yeah. And then I had some participation in some of what that gear did for a period of time. So it was a nice way to transition into this is a good place to learn and have more resources and more access to talent that I can sort of leverage in different areas. And that was an amazing learning experience. I think
Yeah.
having it was my first dip into this is a bigger company. Now, when I got there, they were doing about, I don't know, probably 1/50th of what they're doing now. So,
Yeah.
for comparative scale, it was a lot smaller.
Yeah.
And you could meet everyone in the company pretty easily. Um, I think what attracted me to it though was that there was exactly what you were just talking about. There was this level of authenticity and humility that existed in the gentleman that reached out to me to say, "We've got good momentum here. We're not sure how to get it to the next level. Seems like you might have some ideas. Can we work together?"
Hmm.
And that approach changed everything. One of the smartest guys I ever worked for, when he hired me, and this will always live in my memory. When he was wrapping up his comments to me, he said, "And I look forward to learning from you." And that is the
Damn.
only time in my entire history where I've had a supervisor tell me they looked forward to learning from me. And I walked out of that meeting with so few words, feeling empowered, lifted up, respected, valued, all the things I couldn't put a name to in that moment. And he did it in one short phrase. And so that stuck with me.
But why did he see that in you when all you had done at that point was grow a tiny little company?
I would like to think he saw drive and capability.
Yeah.
He saw that I was interested and motivated, and he saw that I'd brought up enough salient points that were kind of interesting to what they were doing that he thought, give it a chance. And he did. I mean, he took a chance.
Well, and probably also because you were pissing him off enough to call you to begin with, right? So you were a bit of a
Totally
thorn in
true.
his side. And
Yeah.
so anyone who can get on my nerve like that probably is someone that I want to have near me and get some of that, positive energy or whatever you want to call it, you know, and learn from that, I guess. But it's just interesting that somebody in a company, I'm guessing 10 or 20 or 30 times larger than yours or bigger, um,
Mhm.
was looking at it from a standpoint of bringing you in to learn from you. You can help us get from here to here, even though you've never done anything close to that in your professional career until now, right?
Mhm.
So
Well, it's very true. And I would say those opportunities exist out there now. Part of the groups that I work with and get to reflect on my own experience with, you talk about these groups that are in sort of that sub 5 million space or the 5 to sort of 25 I find is an interesting space if you're a founder led company and how that sort of caps you out. If you're a founder led at 25 million, you reach around and pat yourself on the back because you are rare. that is
yeah,
that is a really tough space to crawl from 0 to 5 and then 5 to 15 and 15 to 25, and they're all unique. And the reason I bring that up is because if you can find the attributes that exist for those companies today, sort of that 10 to 25 million space that's got the unicorn DNA, those are your plays. I mean, from my
yeah,
perspective, if
yeah,
for the companies that are looking for something to build upon, give the right people a chance.
yeah,
Because just like that guy gave me a chance as an individual, there's some really good small companies out there that I've seen go from 10 to 50 in 2 years. And
yeah.
and they're not alone. I've seen it happen over and over. You just got to pick them carefully.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so is that luck? Is that like an ingenious founder? What is it? What is it that makes that those ones do differently than the ones that never get from 10 to 15, let alone 50?
Yeah. I mean, part of it's luck. I'd be
Yeah.
lying to say it's not, right? To like put 50% on luck and push that off the table because that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, it's a blend of art and science, I think.
Yeah.
So the companies that tend to get there have CEOs or owners who who really value that sense of authenticity and a desire to be good, not right. They want to be
Hmm.
good at what they're doing and not just be the biggest voice in the room. I think that's a really important trait. The other thing is you have to have you have to have DNA that's clearly understood. What makes your company special to begin with, and don't lose that. No
Hmm.
matter how many transactions or sales you do, my advice even to my own clients is don't lose the DNA that made you special to begin with.
Hmm.
The other piece is have clear market momentum. Understand what's happening in the market that you fit into that space, and what are the concrete things that make you special. And I'll give you an example. I was talking with a hotel firm not that long ago, and the guy was telling me, "Oh, we're going to have the greatest hotel on the face of the planet. It's going to be great." I said, "Cool. What are you going to do?" He says, "Oh, the lighting in the rooms is going to be terrific. The beds are going to be super comfortable. It's going to have a nice desk where you can sit and work." And I just looked at him and I said, "Those are expectations, not exceptions. That's not exceptional. That's
Yeah.
what you're talking about. People expect."
Yeah.
And,
That's the Holiday Inn Express.
exactly.
Everything you
Exactly.
just said. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think too often people get wrapped up in their own press of why they're so, why their company is so great, and keep that enthusiasm, keep that drive, but be realistic about what it is that gives you your momentum in a certain space, right? Like you talk about Holiday Inn, you know what they do well? They market to the transient segment that is off the highway somewhere that is looking for an economy hotel that's a good deal, and they want it to be clean and they want breakfast. There's a
Hmm.
finite set of qualifiers that you can look at and say, yeah, that works. So now everything else in your strategic roadmap falls in line. Okay, so we got to be off a main arterial, a big city, or a highway with a certain car count, or these are things you can quantify, right? It's
Yeah.
a little deep on it, but yeah, that's really it. I mean, once you unpack the science of what these companies are doing, it becomes easier to see over time.
Yeah. No, it's all great points. But so, I mean, for you, what was that like though, coming from running your own small business, straight out of school, working in a theater, doing lighting or doing sound and then lighting, and then starting your own small lighting company? And I'm guessing you probably built it to $3 or $4 million, if that, and then sold it to them. Now, all of a sudden, you're part of a relatively large and rapidly growing company that's about to grow to over $1 billion in revenue.
Mhm.
um, so what was that like? Like, did you walk in and go, I don't know anything, like I really need to figure this stuff out?
I had to walk a very interesting line. So I was young, and that inherently put me at a bit of disadvantage with some members of the teams
I can
who
imagine. Yeah.
saw themselves as much more seasoned, right?
Mm.
Now I always joke it's not the age, it's the mileage, and I got a lot of mileage. So
Yeah.
and that was true then. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
done a lot of stuff, relatively speaking, even though I was very young.
Yeah.
And so how did I deal with the relationships with these folks that have been there for a long time? And that was challenging, right?
Mm.
To not be a know-it-all, but when you did know a lot of things about what was happening, how did you help productively? And so I got a real education on how to share ideas and communicate with people in non-threatening ways. I got an education on how to break a message down into pieces when somebody's not ready to hear 100% of it. Can I get them from 0 to 25 today? And then next week I'll get them from 25 to 50%, and so on. Um, for me, being young, that was a tough thing because I wanted to just word vomit all
Yeah.
over them, all of
Yeah.
the things, and be like, we got to do it this way and do it that
I'm
way.
old and I still do that, Todd. I still do that. Yeah, which I got a funny story to tell you in a bit here, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, no. So I think just coming into it gently and
Yeah.
respectfully was big. The other piece is I didn't understand the matrix structure. I'd never had to go down the hall to ask permission to do something. I just assessed whether or not it made sense operationally, financially, and then I did it. And this was a situation where I actually had sort of four bosses at that point in time. I had four stakeholders that ran different venues. And so I would have to go to each of them and say, hey, is it okay if I do this? And some of them liked me and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
And that played into how effective I felt like I could be. And
Well,
that
and
was
you
hard.
also didn't you change discipline too? Like, didn't you move from lighting to rigging, which I guess are closely married, but not exactly?
I did. So I got a call from a different gentleman, same company, after being with them for I think about uh, maybe 2 or 3 years at that point, and I was handling sales over multiple properties, event sales for shows, big shows,
Yeah.
and he called me and said, we know you like lighting, and we saw that you had some rigging gear. Would you have any interest in figuring out how to stand up a rigging company? And I, not knowing any better, went, sure. And, and just sort of really gave it my all. I focused on how we would achieve it and how it would be systematized, because what I had learned in those few years was if it doesn't have a process, it's not going to work. It has
Hmm.
to have an easily communicated process to everyone in the company. And so here the ask was build a rigging company inside a company that has no reputation for doing that, for a company that doesn't even have clients. If they know they want it, they haven't identified to us that they want that, right?
Hmm.
um, and we have no marketing experience with it. And by the way, we don't own any of that equipment, so we're starting from ground zero. But we got a
Wow.
checkbook, and if you got some ideas, let's give it a go. And so that's what I did, and that was how PSAV's global rigging services started. Really, was the not just with me. I mean, I had a team of capable, brilliant people that I worked with in that process. But yeah, I was the first phone call, and I just took it on.
You had to have done something right, prior to that to impress these guys. Because I can't say, that that's exactly how I probably would have done it. I might have gone out and bought a rigging company and taken the head of that rigging company and said, okay, you're now the head of our rigging division, and we're going to build around you and the company that we've acquired. And
Uh-huh.
seems to be a safer path, but obviously it worked out okay for them and for you as well. So they obviously saw something in you, and you delivered.
I am humbled and grateful by their trust, and
Mm,
I've told that gentleman that he and I have talked over the years, and he knows that I appreciate the chance he took. Because looking back, he was a senior vice president at that point in time. That could have been a career killer for him
yeah,
if
it
he
could have
had
gone
done
horribly
it
wrong.
well. Yeah,
Well, and there was no guarantee that, like you said, your customers weren't begging you to provide rigging services.
yeah,
You weren't known as a rigging company, etc. So there's a lot of reasons it could have failed that weren't your fault necessarily. But
sure.
add to that the fact that you're, quote, green in building a large rigging company within a larger AV company or whatever. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, wow, that's a wild story to me. Like, some people might be listening and going, what's Marcel all excited about here? But, it's just such a risky endeavor from any angle you look at it. But the way
Hmm.
that they did it was remarkable. And, again, I know it sounds like I'm blowing smoke up your skirt, but it's true. Like, you did a remarkable thing by walking into that situation, and within a couple years going from being the young small company acquisition who didn't know much about working in a larger company, knew nothing about rigging, and now all of a sudden he's running this huge division, and not only running it, he's founding it, he's starting it from the ground up and putting
Hmm.
the team together and everything else. So yeah, I mean, wow, that's huge. That's really cool. I like it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was an incredible experience to do that, and being able to proliferate it all over the place. Obviously it started in the U.S. Our first properties that we picked up doing rigging were actually in Florida,
Oh,
and so we picked up one in Florida, we picked up one in Tennessee, and one in Dallas. And I just gave you two states and a city. Sorry about that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, Nashville, Orlando, and Dallas. How about that?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, we picked up these mega properties in each of those areas, and that was sort of the shotgun start to it was, well, hey, we signed a contract, we got to do it now. We're the
Yeah.
rigger for these buildings, and so going from all of those, yeah, I kind of think of them like altitudes now when you talk about revenue thresholds, and what does everybody do at those altitudes? I didn't think of it then. It was all hands on deck, head down, run as fast as you can, right?
Mm.
And founder led mentality. That's
Yeah.
really, that's how it works, right? And you need that three musketeers approach at the beginning for very good reasons. The transition from small revenue to, hey, now we're making significantly more, and now we're making a whole lot, and now the business is hungry, gave me a lot of intricate practice in how to manage teams, how to communicate with executive stakeholders inside a company, outside a company, how to distill the message so it was actionable and relevant. Really difficult stuff to learn in a vacuum.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, that makes so much sense. That's wild. No, I love it. I mean, it's an incredible story, and so to long story short, that whole thing. So you went from startup inside
Mhm.
that company. Basically, it was a startup within a large company, and you, like you said, you had to buy all of the gear. You didn't have the inventory to go after these customers. I would assume the customers were customers of yours already that you were providing other services, and you were just going in and basically bumping off the rigging company in those properties.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were just going deeper into your own client's pocket as opposed to going out and finding new clients. You were going to existing clients and just saying, "Hey, we now offer this service. We feel like, we
Uh,
can package this all together and make it a really good experience for you." And one of the other things I picked up in your CV, sorry to keep talking, but this is really interesting to me, was that you also managed to not only be profitable but constantly increasing the profits by getting rid of discounts and raising prices and things like that. So it wasn't like you were just going in muscling people out of these contracts and saying we'll do it for half the price that they're doing or whatever. You were probably charging more than they were charging, but
yeah.
because of the packaging and whatever, it just became a better solution to the client.
It was. And I think a lot of that strategy around capturing wallet share, not unlike, some of the groups that I work with now, is you
Mm.
have to really understand what the value is. And I know it's such an overused word of, we're providing value. And what does that mean? Well, it means different things to different people. But I have found that I don't know if I would call it a magic formula, but it's kind of a magic formula that there's really four key pieces with a customer that will get you to yes over 90% of the time. And the four pieces that I've found are likability. Do you like me? It's not mandatory, but God, it sure helps.
It sure does. Yeah. I've
The
bought
second,
from some people I don't like at all, and it's never a good experience. You always want to buy from your friends. And yeah,
yeah, you want to be chosen, right? And chosen goes to that likability. You want to buy from people you like.
yeah.
The second is trust. Do you trust me? I think customers ask themselves that question unconsciously, and that's more a matter of, will you deliver what you say? Will you keep your word? Fundamentally, when things go sideways, is
Hmm.
there some confidence I can have in you there, right?
Yeah.
The third is, do you think I'm competent? And that's more a technical attributes question. It's more about, do you think I know the business of what it is that I'm advising you on or helping you through? And then the fourth is, do you think I can help you? And help
Hmm.
is more nebulous because it's sort of like going to the doctor.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I can go in and say my nose is runny, or I've got a cough, or I've got a fever, and then the doctor diagnoses me, right? But the doctor helps me is the important part of that equation. So it's my opinion, but I think for a lot of these groups, like, like what you're talking about, getting in front of those customers and going deeper with them, for them, the value was, do you like me? Do you trust me? Do you think I know what I'm doing? And do you think I can help you? And when we got that to hit, we had that leverage to do those other
Yeah.
things,
No, that's
And
very good. Very good. It makes a ton of sense. And, I think all four of those, so many companies fail on either trying to hit those benchmarks or just don't even really think about that kind of stuff. Like you said, they just run as fast as they can, and which is sustainable to a point. It's like I look at our industry, especially sort of the rock and roll side of our industry since COVID, and all of that stuff, all of the good practices, all of the really strong values as a company and stuff, most of that has gone out the window, and everyone just ran as fast as they could because there was just so much business flying around, and all you needed was basically a catcher's mitt, and you could catch as much as you could handle, right? and
yeah,
and then all of the shortages of people and equipment and everything else came into play. But I feel like that's like Chinese food. It goes away really quickly. Like, you have to have really strong foundation, really strong fundamentals in your business, or else, you're either going to, do this hockey stick up with market conditions, and those are not because you're a great company. Those are because the market's great. And
yeah,
then you're going to start seeing it go down on the other end when that market condition turns back to where it was previously. And so, if it were a normal, stable market, you would just continue to try and improve your business and to hit those fundamentals and pay attention to the reasons that people want to buy from you and all of those types of things. So, like, I've always tried to be disciplined in good times and bad. And I've failed, many times. I've failed, but I've always tried to use the same discipline when things are really good as when things are really tough. Like, you don't just tighten your belt when you can't afford payroll. You tighten your belt when money's flying from the sky and stuff, and you make sure that you've got good, solid practices then. And
yeah.
I know I'm singing to the choir here, but um,
You make a powerful point, though. One of the key indicators to me when I'm involved with a new group is if I see a CEO in fear, we have a major problem.
mm,
That's the fear-based management, and some people look at that as being the abrasive, over-the-top, controlling type personality, and it can mean that. The other thing it can mean is they may not have the depth of experience to solve the problem that's in front of them, and they won't include other people in a way that's meaningful to help them do that.
mm,
And that's a
so common.
really, yeah, that's a difficult thing to overcome, sort
Yeah,
of, to your point, being stable in good times and in bad. And that lets me know a lot about the state of someone's experience, right? Calm waters run deep. If you've
yeah.
got somebody who's jumping all over the place, making knee-jerk reactions to things, it's a pretty good indicator that they haven't been through that before. And it's not a criticism, right? If they haven't learned it, they can't know the answer.
Absolutely.
So
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. So uh, your title when you in your last days or last years at PSAV was VP of Global Ops in rigging or something, right?
Yeah, so over my tenure there, I started their rigging services division, as we talked about, and then we also did a lighting services group and a power distribution services group, all of which
Oof.
I had a founding hand in at some point in time,
Wow.
and managed and then handed off. So we repeated that recipe a few times, but yeah.
So what are I'm curious about this because again, I've never managed to build past a certain point. I'm trying to right now and I hope to get there, but um what are some of the unique problems or challenges of, first of all, starting a company within a larger company like that,
Mhm.
and within that culture and within that, because I know resources aren't a problem, but what are the problems when you're trying to start a company in that situation, and then um, being the head of a division where you're basically running your own company within a company, What are some of the challenges to that as well, running it?
Yeah, so standing up and operating a big business unit under a portfolio company for a private equity firm, right? Because that's really what we're talking about, I think. Keep me honest if I'm understanding your question right. But
Mm-hmm.
these big companies, there's a few things right from the jump that I think are very important. Number one, have the patience to know what you're talking about first. There's a lot of people that you will meet in your first orientation and first go around with these big companies that will be probably 20% of who you ultimately need to meet to make your business unit successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the first thing is seek first to understand, know what you're talking about, get a lay of the land, understand who does what, understand what the company's DNA is, what's the special sauce that makes them important to their customers, get your arms around what the culture is and know it inside out. I think that's sort of the very first place that I start when I'm looking in those environments, both then and now. The second place that I go is to try to understand the receptiveness of the audience and how palatable the project is to the organization. How big is this on the organization? Is the organization having some cash flow issues and this is a play because they need to grow their business and they're not sure where to invest? Or is there already momentum in a certain direction and they're trying to stand up a business unit to get more wallet share? Or is this a completely new innovative idea that's come to them from a specific subset of their customers that they're trying to take care of because strategically those are important customers? And those are all three different answers. So I
Yeah.
think no,
Well, on that topic though, Todd, so
yeah.
when you're starting a company or a division inside a company like that, are there expectations already completely set and hard? Or is it like, do your best, let's see where we can get in the first year? Like, I know that that's kind of a silly question because I think any company that size, especially backed by private equity, they have very, very strict expectations. Like, it's like, yeah, you better hit this in Q1. But
Mhm.
when you're starting something up, is there a little bit of room to live within that if you don't hit right out of the first quarter?
Can go both ways.
Yeah.
You're right. There's a financial modeling process that happens up front. How much are we going to spend? What are we going to get for it?
Yeah.
And that's the buy-in that you'll wind up getting from ownership or executive management. So that sets the stage for what's going to happen. Now, I have had it go both ways. I've had large companies that saw a lot of momentum and effort and they were comfortable with the investment and they understood the good work that was happening. And so they said, yeah, let's keep going. We missed it, but we're making good progress and
Hmm.
let's use that to inform the next phase of budgeting. Let's use that to inform our capex process or our people process. Who do we need to hire into these roles? They use it as a learning tool.
Hmm.
There are organizations who sometimes use it as more of a criticism tool. And I yes to both.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's funny. Like you look at a $1 billion company, for example, and I'm just pulling a number out of the sky. But for them to create a division that they've got to go out and spend $20 million on inventory, for example,
Uh-huh.
um, I'm not saying it's a drop in the bucket, but it's not something that's going to put them out of business, right?
Right.
Whereas small business operators in our industry will go, that's a really cool product. I think I could build a business around that. I'm going to buy 100 of them. And they do it on a whim, on a gut feeling that they're going to be able to turn that profitable. And maybe that's just a lack of discipline. Maybe that's, I don't know. Like, I guess large companies are always a little more, structured and assure of themselves, I guess. I don't know what the word would be, but yeah.
There's one severely positive motivator that happens. And you talk about between big companies and small companies, right? Drop in the bucket versus maybe a big investment, but they do it almost whimsically sometimes because
Hmm.
it's there's not a process and or they don't know the process, which
Yeah.
is also what happens. So what I personally think is the best approach for both actually is get the right subject matter expert involved who also has business expertise to model it out to help inform what the budget is. So here's what usually happens. You have, from a large company standpoint, there's a lot of stakeholders who are creating the financial budgets and ROI statements for whatever they're about to take on, right? Maybe it's an annual budget, maybe it's a new business unit they're standing up. 80% of the stakeholders in that conversation don't come from our industry or don't have subject matter expertise. That's not as a criticism, that's just a statement of observation.
Hmm.
The reason that's important is because it's exactly the opposite in small founder led companies. You often have the person who has the technical expertise. That's what made them special to begin with, right?
Yeah.
I'm running a lighting company. I love lighting. I have a lighting company that sells to these customers because that's what I know how to do. It's already natural for them. Now, where they're weaker is on the business expertise.
Yeah.
If you can bring those two things together, somebody that understands technically what the product is, that understands our industry deeply, and that has the business acumen to put it all together and say, you know what, here's a realistic investment amount and a realistic budget and a realistic timeline. It goes much better like that. And sometimes that happens, but I would say that's more rare. I would love to see more of that happen with
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah. And so, I've built a global company, a small company, but we do business in 100 countries or more. And so I've had to learn, culture and different, doing business in different currencies, different financial models, different, whatever it is, taxation. So it's been challenging. I will tell you that for a small company, you have to be careful that when you go into a country, you don't just lose money based on, like just dealing with their taxation or laws or being compliant or whatever. Um, so for you, was that challenging? Like I'm guessing prior to this job, you had never done business outside the country, outside the U.S.
Oh,
So what were
yeah.
some of your lessons learned along the way?
Two really big ones. The first was understanding that as a society, Americans have more of a Walmart culture. And what I mean by that is we take value from going one place and getting all the things. We
Hmm.
are, as a society, very influenced by one stop shop. That's important to us. Other countries see that as diminished value because they see it as generalist and not specialist. And when you're talking about things in audiovisual, entertainment, or especially higher risk disciplines, power, rigging, automation, they really don't buy from generalist companies. That's not
Interesting.
a thing that sort of existed then. I mean, it's working its way a little more now, but you think about how Europe, for instance, is set up. You can still go to a bakery and get a loaf of bread. And when I think of the last probably 100 times I bought a loaf of bread, I bought it at a Walmart or a grocery store that had loads of other products with it, right? I never just went to a specialty store.
Yeah.
So I think the first lesson for me was whatever business model you stand up, make sure that it hits the specialist focus that will win the business in other countries, and it can't be a generalist focus because that is really more tuned toward a United States crowd.
That is
The
such an amazing point. Like I definitely I love that. And you know what? Like as you're saying it, I'm going, that's so obvious because I mean, I've traveled the world. I've always seen that. I talk about it all the time when it comes to food and other things. Like you go to the butcher for your meat and you go to the vegetable guy for your vegetables. You go to and I love that because the food is always fresher. They always seem to know exactly when you should buy what different types of fruit or whatever. And but I never thought of it that way in our business. But it's totally true. It's totally true. It's a much more specialized approach, and I love that. Great answer. What was number two? Sorry.
uh, Number two is about making assumptions. I've been plenty of places. I've done business in the Middle East and Asia, and Europe, and they all have their own sort of nuances to them. But I found that pretty universally, everybody, and this is more philosophical, they want the right to live in safety. They want the right to worship or not worship as they see fit, sort of a freedom of religion or political um, alignment, if you will. And they want to achieve success however they define it. For some people, it's just paying for a nice meal out for their family, or being able to pay for their kids' schooling, or however they define it. But the reason I share that is because I found myself when I was traveling internationally a lot, starting these different business units all over the world, having my own preconceived ideas, having been only a party to sort of the news cycle that I see in the US, not positive or negative necessarily, but there were pieces that were not shared,
Mm.
that might not be interesting to the general populace, but as I was spending more time in those regions, they became a very high interest for me. Uh, I'll tell you a quick story about that.
Mm.
So I had assumed that on my first trip to the Middle East, everybody would have this sort of, I don't know, animus toward United States citizens, that there would be this friction, or it was my perception. It wasn't based on any real life experience firsthand. It was just purely based on what I thought I had seen or heard or learned in my growing up years in the United States. So I was in the UAE, in the old part of Dubai, and thought I would go check out one of the spice market there, just because it was something fun to do one afternoon. And so I walked over, and I found myself down this dirt lined corridor and old sort of mud brick buildings. Very cool. And these little tiny shops that had two steps up on either side of me. So I'm in this corridor that's this wide, and there's probably, I don't know, 40 little shops all the way down. It's got a cover over the top of it that's sort of this colorful fabric just to block the sun, and charming in its own way. And so I walked a little ways in, and I found this shop that had spices just of every variety. I had no idea what these things were. I just thought they were cool, and I'll get some spices and I'll bring them home. And I don't know, I thought I would make something good with it, right? I was fooling myself in the moment, but that was the hope. And so I walked into the shop, and the shopkeeper came right up to me. How can I help you? I said, I'd like a mix of something that's spicy that I could use on like chicken or beef. And he said, you like spicy? I said, yeah, yeah, really spicy is great. He said, can I make you a curry? That sounds great. So he pulls out this little kind of shovel looking thing, and he's whipping it in there. He's throwing all these different spices in the bag and shakes it up. And it's 12 different colors inside the thing. Really cool. And so I thanked him, and I start to leave, and he goes, you have blue eyes. And I never had another man tell me I had blue eyes. So, that kind of got my attention, first of all. But I said, I do. And he said, where are you from? I said, I'm from the United States. And he goes, America. Never been there. And he starts telling me this great story about how he grew up in Iran that was, not very far from where I was standing. And his family ran this orchard, and he'd grown up sort of running through the oranges in his childhood. And this view of Iran that I had never heard, that I had never experienced, right?
Yeah.
And so he calls his brother in, yells to him from the back, and his brother comes running in and shakes my hand. And this was a big thing for them to, I guess, to meet an American. And so we talked for a few minutes, and he stops suddenly, and he just looks at me concerned, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, Americans, we're friends, right? And it was in that moment I knew that the assumptions that I'd had about going to the region, or the assumptions that I thought they would have about me, were wildly wrong. The
Huh.
reality was, he didn't have any preconceived ideas of who I was. And so I looked at him,
Interesting.
and I said what was true for me. I said, you and I are friends.
That's
And he goes,
interesting.
okay, and this big look of relief. But yeah, anyway, it was kind of one of those moments you don't forget.
I think, Todd, that part of that was because you were kind of off the beaten path and down the back road and all that kind of stuff. Because I think in the more touristy areas, like one of the things I learned when I started traveling the world was I always grew up assuming, because I think this is what the media told me at the time and stuff, was just that everyone wanted our lifestyle. Everyone
Mhm.
wanted Levi's jeans and they wanted to live like Americans and they wanted to act like Americans and look like Americans and everything else, right? And then I get over there and they're like, you people are all assholes, basically. Like, I don't want to be you. You're an asshole. And I started to realize, we're not as loved as I might have thought we were, perhaps. So it's almost the exact opposite. But this was probably in more like, I don't care what country you're in. If you're an American and for periods of time I travel as an American. Sometimes when it's a little heated, I travel as a Canadian because I have both passports. And but sometimes, like, I mean, no matter where you are, if you're in Italy, if you're in France, if you're in whatever country, and you're sort of off the beaten path in the country or in smaller towns, they love Americans. Everyone,
Yeah.
we treat them well, we tip, we're generally pretty friendly. But yeah, that's such another interesting story. I love that. The spice thing. Yeah. So
And I
you're
think people
friends.
are,
You got a friend over there now.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Apparently ran an orange orchard.
How was
Yeah, it
the
was
spice?
lovely. Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
It was. I've
It
not
didn't
been
rip you
able
in
to.
half. Because sometimes they
Oh,
try and nail you when you go, I like really hot. And they go, okay, I'll show you really hot. You want really
it
hot?
was.
Here's really hot.
It was warm. I mean, growing up in Arizona, my comfort food is Mexican food, so spicy Sonoran food is kind of my jam.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just remember when I was first getting into Indian food and I'd go to like these really authentic Indian places and I go, I like really hot. And they'd be like, okay, all right. And I mean, I couldn't even get it close to my face, let alone in my mouth. I was sweating when it was about here, like about a foot away from my face, I was sweating. And I've gotten a little more used to it now. But well, and then actually what happens is I think you go like this, where spice, 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 more spice, and then all of a sudden you kind of hit a ceiling as you get a bit older and you go, ooh, spice really gives me a stomach ache and stuff, like I can't eat this like I used to. So yeah, I'm kind of on the downswing now on spices. I don't get things quite as hot as I used to. Yeah. Do you know Robert Mokry?
I don't.
Robert Mokry's a rock and roll lighting guy, worked for High End for a number of years, but he lives in Austin, Texas, and he is
Okay.
one of those guys that the hotter the pepper, he didn't care. Like, give me the hot. What kind of peppers you got? I'll have those ones. Give me a fork. I'm just gonna eat it with a fork.
Yeah.
And he'd try and get me to try some of these things. And I like hot food, but there's you guys in Arizona and these guys in Texas and stuff, there are some peppers that are just like violent.
Hmm.
Those should not
Oh
be
yeah.
legal, some of those. So, yeah. So that's a really cool story. And so, I mean, you have such a personality where I can't see you being too offensive to too many people. So I would think that regardless of the culture that you're walking into, you're going to be very respectful. You're going to make sure that you're inclusive with those people. You're going to try and do business on their terms, to whatever extent you can, as far as going into different countries. I mean, um, so I'm guessing you didn't run into a lot of trouble.
No, not too much. Not trouble I didn't cause for myself. Like sandboarding in Oman. I really busted my ass up on that. It was a good time. I'd do it again.
Yeah.
Like you get on a snowboard kind of a thing, and you go down the dunes, and
Oh, that'd
it
be a
was,
blast.
oh my God, it was a blast. The problem was the guy just kept telling me how easy it was, but he didn't tell me how to stop. He's like, yeah, just lean over. It's fine. Like you don't need a plan to stop. Just lean over. It'll stop on its own, kind of a thing. Oh yeah, I leaned over all right, man. I was banged up and bruised up, and so yeah, I've
Well, had
certainly
you
had
been snowboarding before or?
once, which
Oh,
why I thought
yeah.
I would be qualified to like snowboard in the Omani desert is beyond
Yeah.
me, but you know, I
Well,
was.
I could, I bet, just because I grew up a skateboarder and then, like I've been skiing my whole life and all those things. So, like, I sometimes when I'm on, gravelly sort of shale kind of bottom of a mountain kind of things. Like I'll
Yeah.
ski down just on my shoes. I'll parallel back and forth or whatever. And, I just have really good balance for those things. So I don't think it would bother me too much. But snowboarding, everyone always says it's a 3-day learning thing. Like it's not 2, it's not 1, it's not 7,
Mhm.
it's 3 days. On the third day, the lights are all going to go green and you're going to be like, I get this. I understand. And you're not going to fall so much anymore. But the first 3 days are brutal.
That's funny. That's exactly what happened for me. And I think
Yeah.
it was on the third day that I finally was having a good time and I was okay. And then I never went again, but it was super fun. I don't know why I
Yeah.
didn't go again. Actually.
Ah, yeah. I'm more of a skier. And, I'm actually getting, and I hate to say this or admit it out loud, but I'm getting to an age where it's getting harder to ski because I ski at a very high level. And I'm
Hmm.
not bragging. I've just been skiing since I was a little kid. I grew up in Western Canada. But when you can't ski often, so in other words, I might go skiing for 4 or 5 days a year at this point, whereas the people I'm skiing with go 100 days a year. And so I'm just not in the condition that I need to be in. Like I exercise every day, but I don't ski every day like these guys, right? So it's really hard. And what happens is you ski one really good run where you're feeling great and you look good and you're doing all the right stuff. The next
Hmm.
one gets a little bit harder. The third run down, your legs are starting to feel like jello already. And then you either go sit in the lounge and drink beer the rest of the afternoon, or you just say, you know what, I'm done. I've had 4 runs. I'm done for the day. That's it. I'm gonna quit.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just getting harder. I either have to commit and ski a lot more, or just say,
Mhm.
you know what, maybe I'll find another hobby. I don't know, but I do love it. And I have a house up there. I have a house up in the mountains where skiing is very nearby.
Gorgeous.
So yeah, it's pretty fun. So in 2020, was it COVID related that you left, or was that just coincidental?
Yeah. So I mean, the shutdown of the industry was felt everywhere, right? And so at that point in time, still PSAV felt it like everyone did, and got down to a very small number of sort of full time folks, hit pause on most of their operations, and the prior to that, there had been a number of opportunities that had been in the back of my mind that I thought, gosh, I think I could really help with that, or I think I could really make a difference there. And they were things that I hadn't put myself all into for obvious reasons, right? You sort
Yeah.
of are where you are and you're working the full-time job and you don't focus outside a lot. And so that was the first time of being home, sitting in a chair, sitting in this chair actually. And I kind of looked up at the ceiling, and I thought to myself, what would you do if you could do anything? And I remember the thing that hit me at that moment was, I like helping people. And then, of course, my next thought was, yeah, that's really great, Todd. How do you make money helping people? That sounds a
Yeah.
little bit apple pie, and that. Um, and but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, what are the things I've enjoyed doing most? I've enjoyed building businesses. I've enjoyed change management in businesses, and helping them go through an acquisition or sale process. And these are things that I've done many times over. And so it was a comfort zone, yes, but it was also something that I enjoyed getting that phone call after it saying, thanks a lot. Couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I wanted more of that and less of the sometimes values that didn't resonate as much for me, that sometimes come out in large ownership groups where people sometimes are um, not specific to any group, but I think it's fair to say money is the biggest part of the
Growth at all
equation.
costs. Yeah.
Growth, right? But sometimes do things that are very short-term action and cause a lot of long-term harm. And
Understood. Yeah.
so I felt myself on this treadmill of, we were knee-jerk reacting short-term, but what we really needed to do was pull our head up from the desk, see over the horizon, and start planting some seeds there. And so that was when I just said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm consulting feels like a four-letter word. I think of myself more like a seamless part of someone's team is how I more like to operate.
Yeah.
But that helping people is valuable to me.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And so, I mean, did anyone go, but Todd, you're starting a, I'm going to call it a consulting business because I don't know how to
Uh-huh.
call it a helping
Yeah.
people, blah, blah, blah business. But so you're starting a consulting business in the live events slash AV industry
Yeah.
during COVID.
Yeah.
During COVID. Like a lot of
Uh-huh.
people need help, but not a lot of people are interested in paying for outside contractors at that point, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, and funny, it wasn't my first go to. I was going to make a career transition. So my first aspiration was I wanted to be an airline pilot,
Mm,
and got dissuaded from doing that early on, about the same years I was telling you about in high school, by some folks who were flying for American and Delta, and they basically said, "Don't waste your time, kid. You're not in the military. You're not going to get the flight hours. You don't have a shot against the rest of us who are far more senior." And he didn't mean it bad. I think he
yeah.
was giving me what he thought was sage advice. Well, what ultimately happened was the housing crisis, and then you had a lot of pilots who retired out of the industry, or by either by choice or by force, and then there was a huge shortage. So the greatest irony is it probably would have been perfect timing.
No
Um,
kidding, right? Yeah.
right.
No
That said,
kidding.
I don't regret that at all. But what was funny to me is years later did finish out my license, and I thought to myself, oh, maybe this is the moment. I'll go fly charters. That's what I'll do. This will be the moment to change. Well, and of course, there's no planes in the sky, the pandemic is because there's nobody traveling and groups can't gather and you can't be in confined spaces. And so I remember sort of laughing to myself, thinking, "Geez, Todd, you know how to pick them, don't you? Like you pick the things that require people getting together to
Yeah.
do it." So I leaned in on the event side. I really loved the values of that. I know a lot of people in these industries that brings a certain measure of what I enjoy. I like visiting with people.
Yeah.
And so I used that as a time to build. I used
Yeah.
it as a time to learn. And you're right, there were a lot of people that said, "Boy, we don't have the money to bring on somebody to coach us through some of this, or be sort of a fractional executive and add bandwidth to our projects the moment. But we might need that down the road, and we're looking for somebody who won't make us look stupid in front of our clients and has a lot of history doing the stuff. So that would be a good person for us to be able to reach out to." And that's ultimately sort of what happened. It
Yeah.
was seed planting, and then the seeds started coming up.
Well, and I would guess, I wouldn't guess. I'm quite positive that you earned okay at PSAV. So you didn't have pressure to do something instantly. You had, the benefit of some time to make a decision, a good decision, and the pilot thing. So you said you finished your license. So what level of license do you have? Like what can you fly?
So I'm an instrument rated pilot and would be about 3 days of training away from finishing my commercial.
Oh, really? And then you could fly 737s.
No, I'd need some additional ratings for that. I need my ATP for that, my airline transport pilot license for that, which is a step up from there.
Uh,
Uh, I, at this point, I think I probably will finish my commercial. Having the commercial means you can charge for it, so I could ferry aircraft, or I could fly. Um, with some companies, do some level of charter. As it turns out, I've wound up using it in my business, and it's been really terrific to be able to self commute certain places. So I've had kind of that as a
So
as a
what
tool in
kind
the
of
tool.
planes can you fly though? You can fly jets. You can fly private jets types of
I'm not
planes,
type
or
rated on a jet,
oh, okay,
um, but any high performance single aircraft, I
yeah,
can
interesting,
I could operate.
fun. Yeah, it's something I always wanted to do. It's funny when I was I don't know 17 years old or something in Canada, I I started on an ultralight, and it was the ultralights though that looked like airplanes,
Uh
but you
huh.
didn't need licensing for it. So I took some lessons in that, and really loved flying it. It was fun. And then I decided I wanted to go for my, single engine, blah, blah. And so I flew a plane. I don't remember how many hours of flying I did. And then I had to go to ground school and I quit. I was
Mhm.
like, this is boring. I don't want to do this. I just want to fly planes. Come on, man. What is all this stuff? I don't want to go back to school. That's
Yeah.
not my goal here. But yeah, well, good on you. That's really excellent. I'm envious. And one of the questions I've been wanting to ask you here, because you talk at such a high level for, and I'm not going to say for someone in our industry, because I know a lot of really smart people in our industry, but our industry is not typically, you know, uh, like long, people don't go to Wharton to run a lighting company, or Harvard to run a lighting company or sound company or a rental company or whatever you want to call it. And that's not a knock on anyone in our industry, by the way, because you learn in hard knocks in our industry, and some of the smartest people I know in business are in our industry. But you talk like someone who went to Harvard or Wharton or something. You have very strong principles of business and finance and just seem to have a really, really good knowledge and education on that. Was that all practical, or did you at some point go to school?
The vast majority of it was practical. It
Really?
was getting to sit at the table with really smart people and be a sponge.
That's
And
wild.
the amount of, I think, gratitude I have for them just letting me sit in the room and absorb the lessons is huge. Uh, I, and in terms of formal training, there's I'm not sure what I would even point to in our industry now in terms of degree programs or anything like that, right? And oddly, it's one of the things that I have felt sometimes uh, has negatively impacted companies in our industry when the organizations don't have that balance of art and science together, if you will. The
Yeah.
science of running the business and the financials and the processes, but the art of understanding the industry and its culture and its opportunities and the trajectory of its growth. I've in recent years, I used to think, boy, I travel an awful lot and maybe I don't need to travel that much. And then I realized that it was the travel and the talking to people is how you learn that information. You learn what's going on with people, you learn the trends, and you hear what's happening inside lots of different companies to where you can sort of synthesize that together and go, you know what? That's happening in 47 different companies in our industry. That's a thing. What do we do with that to help the industry do better in that way? And so, yeah, I would say it's really the practical piece is enormous.
Yeah, I mean, on a much smaller scale than you, I have helped a lot of people, and I've never done it, as an official title or role or anything. And I don't really have, some of the foundation from, a business acumen or an accounting or finance acumen that you would. But for me, it really was just like obvious solutions to difficult problems most of the time. So, Bob would call me and say, "Hey, my company's stuck, and would you mind having a conversation with me?" And I'll give him all the time in the world, and I don't charge him for my time, foolishly most of the time. But I will talk through the problem and I'll give him 14 different possible solutions. And he'll say, well, which one should I pick? And I'll say, well, you need to make that decision. I can't make that final decision for you. I'm going to give you some options. I think each of those options has the ability to solve your problem, but
Mhm.
you need to pick which one feels best to you and which one makes the most sense to you or whatever, because you need to be behind it. If I choose the one for you, you might always go, he chose the wrong one, and you're just going to be against it the whole time. And so just pick one, right? But
Yeah.
uh, it's it's such a need in our industry. You're right. Like there is no formal education for running a sound and lighting production company 101. It's typically people jumping in, seat of their pants. they'll call Uncle Tom or somebody who's got some financial or accounting background, and they'll pull him out of retirement to become their CFO. And he's
Yes.
never been a CFO before. He's a bookkeeper, and he's retired and doesn't know what he's about to get into. And, I think what has happened is, fortunately, the business has been strong enough to pull people through those educations, to pull people through, like, they don't go bankrupt the first mistake they make, because there's enough profit being thrown off of these jobs and stuff that it seems to work out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times people just need a partner to walk alongside for a little while, somebody who's not afraid to roll up their sleeves and, you know, give them the advisory options, right? Here's the list of things that I think you might want to think about. They choose the things that they want to focus on, and then having that person that can kind of walk alongside. I often joke that I like riding shotgun, or I'm sort of a ghost in the machine, and I enjoy that space. I
I'll
don't
tell you
mind it.
what, man. It's so important. Like, I've told people my whole business career, like, one of my greatest challenges in business is that I never have sort of an equal in my company. And, I'm a fairly strong thinker, and I come up with lots and lots of ideas. I'm very creative when it comes to solutions. But what happens, you're sitting in a conference room with all of your people having a meeting, and eventually you train them not to bring any ideas to the meeting because they know, oh, Marcel's just going to have these 10 big ideas and he's going to solve the problem and he doesn't need my ideas, right? And that is so problematic. So I've really been forcing myself to get out of that, and to, even if I know that I know something right now about the thing that we're talking about, I know the solution, I got to shut up and not, because what's going to happen is, if I just keep delivering all of these ideas, I'm going to lose everyone at the table. They're just going to shut up. And that's happened to me multiple times in multiple companies. And so, at my ripe old age, I'm still learning that. And, I told you earlier, and these stories kind of collide, but I told you earlier, you were talking about sort of this topic where you basically said you had so much energy and you had to pull yourself back because otherwise you were just running over people, because you were like, well, first we'll do this and then we'll do this, and I don't know, you're probably not old enough, but there used to be a cartoon with, like, sort of a big bulldog and a little tiny dog that always followed him around. I forget what they were called, but and the big
Yeah.
bulldog walked real slow, and we're gonna go get this done, and we'll eventually get there, and the little one was like, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do this, and he'd, like, smack him and go,
Mhm.
shut up, and send him
Yeah.
flying. But so I've been toying with the board idea. I've been asked to join many boards, and I've always turned it down because I just thought I was too busy in my own business. But um, I've gotten involved in a couple of deals where there were either roll ups or there were some acquisitions, and I've become an advisor in those situations a few times now. And one of them, I was asked to join a board. And so I went to my first board meeting, and there have been multiple now, but I went to my first board meeting, and not long, like, I don't know, 2 days after I got home from that board meeting, I get a call from the private equity group who brought me into it, and he said, first, Marcel, thank you so much for coming to the board meeting. It was amazing. It's these are all financial guys. And
Mhm.
so they really enjoyed having someone who kind of knew the inner workings, not only of a company, but especially a company in our industry. And and he said, I can't remember exactly. He was very diplomatic about basically saying, you need to shut up every once in a while and stop throwing everything at us. Because
Yeah.
basically, and I didn't even think of it at the time, but I completely ran over the CEO. The CEO didn't necessarily have 100 ideas at the table at this board meeting. And I just filled in all the blanks. And it was completely inappropriate. It was an epic fail on my part. And I was embarrassed when he told me this. And so every day since that time, months ago, I've been thinking, I'll never do it again. 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 And I probably will, but I'm at least aware of it. I'm aware of it, right?
Yeah.
So
We're all learning and doing our work, right? We're all learning our pieces.
Well, I would guess that you fall into a similar situation though, where you have to be careful because you could easily make a CEO or a founder feel really bad about himself, or you could, sort of pick him up and help him to be a little bit more inspired or enthusiastic about the future. And that's all based on your words. That's based on how you present the situation to him, right?
It is that has come up multiple times, and some of it is, I think, there's a factor of inside an organization, you need teams to respect their leadership in order to want to adopt the action and enroll in whatever their strategy is for their business, right? You need their
Yeah.
buy-in.
Mm.
And so I have always been very careful, and it's genuine. I'm there to lift up, not pull down. It's pretty simple. I want to be able to support and help and add bandwidth. And usually when I say that, they go, "Oh, add bandwidth." There's some kind of executive level projects we haven't really approached and we haven't dug into because we haven't had the bandwidth. And then it starts to soften a little bit, right? Because now it's not about solving a problem, it's about helping provide capacity. And in
Yeah.
truth, I think that's more accurate. I think there's a lot of, one thing I'll say a lot is you should be really proud of the great work that the teams have done. None of the conversation is about, a criticism or an indictment. It is only looking at the next great place you're going to go. So
Yeah.
let's honor everything that's happened before, and it's true. They have done and built these great businesses, and it's okay to get to a point where you say, yeah, I don't know how to do that. I don't feel comfortable doing that. um, a tie back to flying, that's something right away if you're doing it wrong. you
Yeah.
you will know right now if you've entered a maneuver that is not to be done that way, or if you have an engine problem, or that machine will give you feedback instantaneously.
Yeah.
And so, you have those situations that I feel like I've learned from as well. If I move the throttle forward a little bit and I pressurize the system, so to speak, in a company to check it out and see what happens. Does it run smoother or rougher?
Yeah.
Is it, what am I looking for here? So, yeah, I think there's
Yeah, it's a great
all of
analogy.
the,
Yeah. So, just to sort of finish off on your business, because I want to talk about some of the volunteering things you do, and I can't keep you here all day, unfortunately. So the business is called Ventana.
Mhm.
Does that name mean anything?
It does. So, and I'm going to say the cheesiest thing you're going to hear today, but at a time when I thought life was closing all the doors, I decided to build a window. It means window in Spanish, and where I
Ah,
live,
interesting.
there is Ventana Canyon, not too far down the road from me, and so it had sort of this kind of double meaning for me, that it was a bit of an escape hatch, if you will, or a new way out to discover something different. But it was also sort of a nod to where I grew up.
Ah, that's cool. I like it. I think it's a cool name. And so that business basically does a combination of consulting. I know I'm minimizing that word by saying it, but your consulting businesses, I think you get involved in a bunch of M&A activity, um, but also investment or private equity or
Sure. So most of what I'm doing is strategic consulting,
okay.
is helping people build the plans that get their company to where they want it to go. It's
Hmm.
adding that bandwidth to solve a specific problem, or to do a deep dive on the business and say, you know, you want to get to Y, we're at X. Here's the things that we want to do to get where you want to be. And I'm oversimplifying because that touches areas of financial optimization. It touches capital. It sometimes involves me doing sales team training and weaponizing them at a much higher level specific to our industry.
Right.
It gets into teaching lead generation and how do we capture more wallet share from our existing customers. What do our products and services do right now that we could leverage in another vertical we haven't even thought of, that maybe I could introduce them to? So it touches a number of those areas. And I would say the space that I spend probably 60% of my time involves all of those things and is working mostly with founder-led or early matrix companies. It's a lot of founder-led companies that will say, we need somebody who specializes in taking us from small to big. How do we
Hmm.
do that? What are the steps? And will you come alongside and be player coach, run some plays with us, help us figure it out?
So to sort of define where that is that like in our industry, would that be a company like somewhere between 5 and 15 or 20 million?
I have a couple of clients in that space. Yeah, I think the sort of 5 to 25 is a good range,
Okay.
and I enjoy that space. I think it's getting people from that all hands on deck leadership mentality migrated over to a stay in your lane leadership model, and it's very consequential in my opinion. If you do it badly at that stage, you'll never get to 50 million. If you do
Yeah.
it right, you stack the odds in your favor that you might get to 200 million.
Yeah.
So
Great point.
there's a handful of those, and I also do some work with some much larger players as well in very similar categories. Now for them, and think more like 250 million plus size companies, it's a mature matrix model. But usually what's happened is that they have a change management need, or they've gotten corporate inertia in a direction that it shouldn't be going, and they're trying to figure out how to grow and more efficiently operate their current business. And so that's a different kind of an animal. I would say probably 10% of my interactions are acquisition and sales. So I do have a client currently that I work alongside them to help protect their valuation and help actively negotiate on their behalf, and sit on the calls and work through the due diligence packets with them to make sure that they've got somebody on their side calling it out when maybe it's not in their best interest.
Very cool. Yeah. That's great. That's fantastic. And so, but most of your clients or companies that you work with are in the AV live events space?
Yeah, AV and entertainment spaces.
Okay, cool.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting. So you love boards and volunteer boards and all of these types of things. I actually did not know of the very first two that are listed here. I didn't know that you were on the ESA board. And I also didn't know that you were on the ESTA board, and you're the president of ESTA. So it just shows how much I've kept in touch with ESTA over the years. I used to play along fairly closely with them and got involved in some of the technology when I was with Martin. I think we were
Yeah.
part of the fog and smoke group there or whatever. And but that's got to be a really interesting experience, and also probably opens a lot of doors too, I would guess.
It has been wonderful to be able to spend time with that group of folks, not just the board of directors, who I have tremendous respect for and really just appreciate them as people, but also a lot of the working groups. And you talk about technical standards and what's happened there. I've certainly been involved in some standards writing, particular to the rigging industry, but also the programs they have in protocol. Their journal that they publish quarterly that highlights good things happening in our industry is another piece that I get to sort of tap into and learn from the folks in that realm.
Yeah.
And then obviously the ETCP programs, the certification programs for power and electrical, power distribution / electrical, and then rigging, of course. So I've partnered with them, gosh, in some form or another for almost 10 years now, and have served on the board of directors now in my second 3-year term. So yeah, I've really enjoyed that. And we'd love to have you come back.
Uh-huh.
There's my
Well,
shameless invitation and plug for you.
yeah, I mean, without making this sound lousy, what is Esta's role now? And so I know that like earlier, 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, Esta was starting to swing a pretty good bat, and
Uh-huh.
Steve Terry was involved, and there were some significant players, and there probably still are, but they were able to, they were a voice, and they were a voice that people were listening to. I don't hear a lot of people talk about ESTA these days, and I don't know if that's just, the way it goes, or maybe I'm just not listening to the right people or whatever. But what's your drive? What's the role for ESTA right now?
Yeah. So the trajectory for ESTA has changed a lot. And I mean, even since the pandemic has changed a lot. So going to your comments, there has been a long legacy of equipment dealers, manufacturers. It's all companies, has been historically, right? It doesn't have individual members, it has organizations as members.
Yep.
And so you will have an executive or representative of a company that comes to the meetings and they help write standards and they advocate on behalf of their own subject matter expertise. And so that those groups are very active actually. The technical standards program has many standards that are currently under development or revision
But if I
and
if I can interrupt just for a second, I apologize. But those standards are not, like, they're suggestions. They have no weight, correct?
so
Or no teeth.
the they're ANSI accredited. So the ANSI standards, that was more true than in the past than it is now, for the reason that you're starting to see a lot more lawsuits reference OSHA, and OSHA starts to point to ANSI and say, well, this is what a body of experts in the industry said, therefore it becomes referenced in the lawsuit. So is it a recommendation? Yes, in its purest form, it is. That being said, the acceptance of it in courtrooms now is dramatically higher than ever
Oh,
before.
interesting.
So while recommendation, it's definitely being leveraged to have very consequential conversations for people.
And
Like,
what
hey,
does it
you
take?
better.
It's funny because I was uh, talking with Jim about this on ESA, and what does it take to get from suggestion to, a stamp that says this is ESTA approved, or ESA approved, or whatever, where it's like a UL where it has to be on there. It's a compliance thing.
Mhm.
Is that just an
Yeah, I mean,
impossibility to get to that point, or?
No, I mean these committees will spend generally more than a year. I mean, less than a year would be incredibly fast to try to achieve something. But the cycle of them is, I would say, sort of the ones I've been involved with, kind of 1 to 2.5 ish years, depending on complexity. And it goes through rounds of public review, so anyone can weigh in and tell you if you're right or you're wrong, or they have a third answer you haven't thought of, and then ultimately it does get the ANSI stamp and you can put that into practice. I would say the two most popular programs, Resta for sure, are the standards that we're talking about and also ETCP. So
Yeah.
the certificates in that program continue to grow. Actually, this year they've grown a lot. And so there's a lot of pieces there, but I would say that the organization is really focused on relevance right now in terms of how do we get from where we were to where we want to go. And a good example of that is the equitable workplace initiative that was sponsored through Netflix under ESTA. And um, if you haven't seen it, definitely something to check out. But it speaks to that diversity and inclusion. How do we get a workforce initiative in our industry that really starts to diversify things a bit more, more representative of the demographic of who our industry is?
Mm.
So, that's an initiative you wouldn't have seen even, 5 or 10 years ago, right? And so there's
Yeah.
there's definitely some significant areas there where they are evolving in that space.
And then what about things like, the stuff that Michael Strickland, and certainly I helped him on some of it, but Michael Strickland was so good at getting through to, the government, and trying to get things passed and put in place to protect our industry. And, his famous saying was always that, industries like the airlines or hospitality would show up at the Senate with battleships, and we would show up in 100 canoes.
Mhm.
And so, does ESTA get involved in any of that kind of stuff, like protecting protecting our industry, I guess, or uniting our industry from a standpoint of, this could happen again where the world tries to shut down our entire industry, and we want to have a voice when that happens, not just 100 canoes, right? So,
Uh-huh.
have you guys gotten involved in that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, there was a creative industry roundtable, second annual, that was hosted at the NAM show this year. I moderated last year and this year, and it's a collection of about 25 organizations in our industry from around the US that are passionate about that exact workforce development voice that we have together, and so it's very directly related to that. I personally am in favor of any voices that want to help us unify and lift up and be visible. And
Yeah.
so I yeah, that's a really good one. And so we connect quarterly, but certainly have a very clear vision around saying let's protect each of our own sort of unique identities. We come to the group not as a let's have one voice for all, because I think what a lot of people reacted to, or what I've observed is, you know, I still have my own specialness about my organization that serves a certain purpose, and you have yours. And so how do we all sort of, if we're not going to have one voice, can we get all of the key voices or the influential voices who represent much bigger audiences to the table so that they can all sit together? And really that's what that's been. So yeah,
Yeah.
really
Well,
like that.
and this is my opinion only, and it's probably not an extremely popular opinion, but um, part of the problem is aligning with NAM, I think. And I say that because NAM is not really representative of our industry. We're such a tiny little cog in their massive chain, and we are very small to them as an industry. And I know we've been pushing hard in that direction for a number of years now to better align with NAM as part of this, we're a music industry and blah blah blah. But we're shoved off into the corner. We're such a small piece of it. Like, I'd certainly love to see it more aligned with LDI, with shows that really are substantial industry shows for our own industry. And I say this from a person who's got experience exhibiting at NAM as a lighting company, and realizing we are such a small part of this business, these massive music store people and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's just my own thought. Like, hopefully you're aligned with LDI as well.
Yeah, so what's really interesting about that is the ESTA and the ESA have sort of been the neutral nation, so to speak, to host those meetings for which NAM volunteered space
Mm-hmm.
when people were going to be in town around it. So two things. I agree with what you said, and by the way, NAM sees that as well. Their teams have been terrifically gracious, and they also recognize that their primary demographic is um,
Musical instruments.
overwhelms and will take a long time to sort of bring in
Yeah.
production side of it, right? So there's good visibility there. They're not unrealistic about that. They also at the same time value the whole ecosystem, and so that's made for a nice conversation. Now, all that being said, believe it or not, we actually did approach LDI some time back, and that was not a it was not a
A priority for them.
received conversation at that point in time.
Interesting.
But that being the case, it is certainly something that we are actively talking about and would like to be visible where our members are visible. If I can put it
Well,
that way, I think
if you
that's
if
really
you need
important.
if you need some muscle, Todd, sick me on them. I'm happy to.
I will. I'm already setting up the call as we speak.
There you go.
Thank
There you
you.
go. And so, what did I miss here? So, you're also a volunteer pilot. So, you're not only a pilot, but you're flying as a volunteer, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So what I liked about that organization, a little more personal. I mean, obviously behind the scenes charity, very personal cause for me, and then service with ESTA and service with the Event Safety Alliance in terms of their mission aligns for me. What I liked about Angel Flights West was the idea that you might have people who couldn't afford to get to critical medical care and that if you had the time and you had the access, that maybe you could make a real difference for them.
Interesting.
So, and it's not just adults, it's kids too. It's kids who are going to cancer treatments or things that their parents desperately wish that they could afford to transport and get them to the best hospital where their kid could get a
Wow.
good chance. So that really hit for me. I've got three kids, and I would hope that if I was in a situation where I needed something critically, that somebody would raise their hand for me too.
So how often are you doing that? Like how often are you doing these volunteer flights?
It's exceedingly rare.
Yeah.
And part of that is my availability, and part of
Yeah.
that is where the mission is. So what they will do is they will publish how many people and where they want to go to and from, and days and times and things like that. So it's a large network of folks. But that being said, it does greatly reduce sort of where you can get, to and from, depending on where they need to go.
Wow. That's amazing. I
I'd like to do
mean,
more of it, to
congrats
be
and
honest.
good on you. Good job. Like you're doing some incredible work, and like I said in the intro, I'm not worthy. I appreciate you taking the time for a dummy like me to sit here and learn from your incredible wealth of knowledge. And I'm not making fun of you because you've really done some cool stuff. I mean, I'm definitely impressed with how you've managed to, get into that PSAV thing, and then not only survive but thrive and ride it to a pretty high level. And congrats, man. That's really, really cool.
Thanks.
Did I
Thanks
miss
for
anything, Todd? Did I forget
no,
to talk about anything? Because
no, I don't.
I'm
I don't
sure
think so.
not unlike you, I have about a billion other things that I got to get to. So I'm gonna have to say goodbye. But
Right
no,
on.
thanks so much for doing it, Todd. I appreciate it. And let's
Thank
catch
you.
up one of these days when you recover from spending 2 hours with me, and we can talk about stuff that we couldn't talk about on a podcast.
No, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for having me. It's always
Awesome.
good to see you.
Thanks so much. See ya.
Thanks, man. See ya.